Fellow Nigerians, the corruption in Nigeria has no part 2. I mean, Nigeria appears to be the most corrupt country in the world. You know, when Buhari came in, he told us he was going to fight corruption. But I tell you, Nigeria appears to be the most corrupt nation in the world.
The House of Representatives set up an ad hoc committee on crude oil to probe crude oil theft, and also to probe an allegation that $2.4 billion, which was supposed to be proceeds from the sale of 48 million barrels crude oil, were missing. It was alleged that the crude oil was sold somewhere in China and the proceeds paid to private accounts.
And we all know that recently, Bola Tinubu made a comment that he's going to fight corruption. And you know, there was an uproar. Nigerians were like, how can somebody which is alleged to be corrupt come out to say he's going to fight corruption? You can see for yourself that Nigerians do no longer believe in the leadership of the APC because they don't have people with clean hands that can really save Nigeria. There was this whistleblower that came up with an information that some government officials are in the business of selling our crude oil in places like China.
Information on this sale was purportedly given by whistleblowers who had spoken up as far back as 2020. However, it wasn't until December 2022 that the House decided to look into the matter. The hearing seemed to have met a brick wall after top functionaries of government were invited and refused to show up. In an interesting turn of events, however, one of them was the Attorney General of the Federation eventually honored the committee's investigation but dismissed all allegations surrounding the mysterious $2.4 billion sale of crude oil.
The amount of dollars they are calling in this allegation is something that when you hear it, you will shiver. I mean, this amount of money goes into the pockets of just a few number of people. And one begins to wonder, why is it that our politicians have lost their conscience? Why is it that they lack empathy, even for the ordinary Nigerians? We all saw the problem we had with ASU, how students could not go back to school because ASU's demand was not met. We have these politicians, their children are in abroad. They have access to foreign medical care. But for the ordinary man on the street, they don't care if you go to hell. So guys, in this allegation, it might surprise you to know that the Attorney General of the Federation was mentioned. There are other government officials that have been mentioned, but they refused to respond to the invitation that was given out to them by those who are probing this issue. And do you know what bothers me the most? That our Attorney General was mentioned in this case. Even if he's not a part of it, how could it be that somebody of that caliber should be mentioned in such an allegation? I mean, corruption in the highest level. So guys, I'm going to allow you just watch this video. Take your time and watch this video, and you tend to know that when we say we need a change of government, when we say we need fresh hands, when we say we need people without any corruption allegation, when we say we need people who have empathy, when we say we need people who understands the feeling of the ordinary man on the street, when we say we need people who are ready to take Nigeria to another level, we are not just making ordinary statements. We mean it.
The evening of frank conversation here on Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf. In December last year, the House of Representatives set up an ad hoc committee on crude oil to probe crude oil theft, and also to probe an allegation that $2.4 billion, which was supposed to be proceeds from the sale of 48 million barrels crude oil, were missing. It was alleged that the crude oil was sold somewhere in China and the proceeds paid to private accounts. The information on this sale was purportedly given by whistleblowers who had spoken up as far back as 2020. However, it wasn't until December 2022 that the House decided to look into the matter. The hearing seemed to have met a brick wall after top functionaries of government were invited and refused to show up. In an interesting turn of events, however, one of them was the Attorney General of the Federation eventually honored the committee's investigation but dismissed all allegations surrounding the mysterious $2.4 billion sale of crude oil. Now, was there any iota of truth to the sale, Or had the House been led on a wild goose chase all along? Assuming there was an allegation, a true allegation that $2.4 billion was missing, hasn't the House left it a little too late, considering that its activities are currently rounding off for the 9th Assembly? The chairman of the House Ad Hoc Committee on Crude Oil Theft, Honorable Mark Bila, is my guest tonight. Honorable Mark Bila, welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you very much, Malpe. Pleasure is all mine.
Thank you. Well, I was listening to, or well, I say I was reading your speech. It was just excerpt of it at the inauguration of your committee, so sometime in December last year, and you were talking about how important this is. That's the reason why, even in the midst of politicking, where you're supposed to be backing your constituencies, the House thought it important enough to bring this matter to the fore. At the time you were speaking, because you also made reference to some people who were in jail who had information on the matter, you're also hoping to travel to China, the United States, and I think Mexico. Yeah, those are the three countries that you mentioned. Has the probe gone according to how you thought it was going to go, considering the allegations that you had at hand?
Thank you very much, Malpe. First of all, let me put it in the right perspective. Unfortunately, people only look at the name of the committee but don't have the details of the mandate. So now the mandate of the committee is three-pronged, if I might say so. One, the investigation of the whistleblower allegations of 48 million barrels being sold, which cost us a loss of about over $2.4 billion. And then dovetailing from that, the House felt it necessary to now investigate all crude oil exports out of Nigeria and the remittance of the funds from such exports from 2014 till date. And considering the fact that we now saw a lot of whistleblower information being revealed to the Nigerian public, the House now felt, okay, the third part of the committee's work is investigate whistleblower revelations and recoveries, because the federal government has been claiming that they have recovered several millions of dollars of money. So the Nigerian people want to know what has happened to that money, how was it utilized, the other whistleblower revelations, how are the security agencies acting upon it. Yeah, so far, like you rightly pointed out, we have had the challenge, which is a recurring theme, which is why some of us in the National Assembly believe the House should do more about enforcing its invitations and providing consequences so that people start to respect. In other climes, you would not see even champions of industry, richest men in the world, respond to the call of their parliament because they know the import of it. But you see 7 government officials, like the Minister of Finance, she has refused to honor the invitation. Today, we have just written a letter telling her if she doesn't appear now, she will now be summoned by the House. The Attorney General didn't respond for several weeks. Fortunately, he has responded. We would still have to call him for one more time because we have to go through what he has responded. So the main challenge has been the response from the officials of government to the investigation. Then with regards to the details and the substance of the investigation itself, for someone who has some experience in the sector, it is difficult to imagine how 48 million barrels, which translates to about 48 cargoes of crude, can just be sold, because each cargo of crude out of Nigeria usually is in the region of 950,000 barrels to almost 1 million. So how could that have just left the country and been stored in China and then be sold? The information first came to the fore through an online medium, Point Blank News, through a Nigerian who unfortunately is seeking asylum now in the U.S. But these are weighty allegations that as a responsive and responsible House, we took our time, of course, to first of all ascertain the veracity of these claims, obtained information about those people who made the claims, some documentation, and of course the bureaucracy of our work made it unfortunately impossible to have done the investigation earlier. But fortunately, we got off with the investigation in December. So now, from the initial information we have received, there are documents that are not corroborated, that do not show even up to 12 million barrels in storage. We're still waiting from the people who made these claims to show us the details of the quantity of crude. They have some documents which the authorities say is falsified that show that about less than 10 million barrels or so were exported out of the country. We have not seen, which is part of why we want to visit China, like you mentioned. There are other issues in the U.S. that we have to deal with about certain cargoes that we have also traced to the U.S. and we're seeking the House's consideration to even extend the investigation a little bit earlier to probably like 2011. And then we have also seen some documents that show crude was stored in some facilities in China, but there has been no corroboration about sale and the funds.
So if I'm getting you correctly, you're saying that the allegations which were made, you haven't been able to get substantial evidence to corroborate the allegations.
Yes, because it's important for Nigerians to note, because Nigerians are quick to claim or think there's compromise. Our work in the National Assembly is to be in the unbiased arbiters. So
this wasn't exactly sent to the National Assembly. I mean, because the initial insinuation at least the impression I got, was that the House had received this anonymous, perhaps petition or whistleblower information, and perhaps decided to act upon it, not based on online news, as you seem to be saying.
This is a very good point you have raised. Nigerians need to understand how the powers of the House work. We even have provisions in our rule that if you as a member feels your privilege was breached by an online publication or a newspaper item, you bring it to the floor. What gives the force of law to our action is the resolution of the House. So if information becomes known to the public that has been provided, it is our responsibility to consider it on the floor. Is it worth our looking at? There's a lot of information we didn't receive a petition about. We heard, for instance, Ekwere Madu was arrested. We saw it in the news. Nobody sent us a petition. We raised a resolution on the floor, wrote a letter saying that, no, we want some leniency to be considered. That is how it works. So we don't have to receive a formal petition to look at issues.
We'll come to that, the issue of Senator Ekwere Madu, before we wrap up this program. But I wanted, to stay on the issue, because it's one thing for you to get, and I'm not trying to impugn the credibility of any online media house, but it's one thing for you to get news from a credible source. It's another thing for you to just see something online and say, we think we need to investigate this. I know that $2.4 billion, which was supposed to be the revenue accruing from that 48 million barrels sale, if any such thing happened, is huge, assuming it were to have happened. But beyond that, if there was no preliminary investigation done to find out if indeed there could have been some merit to it, hasn't the House been on a wild goose chase?
No, so that's why I tried to mention earlier that we didn't think it necessary to pass a resolution until we saw some evidence of communication. So for the sake of your question, let me reveal the fact that we also saw correspondence between the people who alleged this and the DSS. It is in our possession. That's enough for us to know it is worth looking into. The DSS also responded saying that we have received your information and we're going to look into it. And several other correspondence that was even communicated to Mr. President himself. So it is not based on any wild goose chase. It's based on the fact that there was actual communication between these individuals.
Between the whistleblowers.
Well, yes, let's call them whistleblowers, yes.
And
the officials of government. Yes.
Okay, well, so far so good. I mean, we've seen the response of the Attorney General, who was one of those that was invited, and he says, let me state on the record for the benefit of Nigerians and the committee, that the allegations relating to the 48 million barrels are baseless. The allegation is unfounded, it lacks merit and indeed substance. The allegation in its own right is devoid of any reasonable ground pointing to a material suspicion cogent enough to invoke the constitutional oversight of the committee. In 2016, allegations were rife and hyped in the social media. There were allegations of the existence of stolen 48 million barrels of Nigerian crude in China, said to have been valued at $2.4 billion. So he even says it was farther than the 2020. It was as far back as 2016. Well, based on what you're saying now, that there isn't sufficient documentation to back those arguments, it does appear that the AGF is right.
Now, let me first of all put it in the right perspective. The AGF, first of all, is doing himself and the country a disservice to say what he said about not worth the committee's investigation. Why is that? Because he happened to have been part of that presidential committee that was set up to look into this issue. He didn't mention that to the Nigerian public. A committee was actually set up by Mr. President to investigate this issue. So Mr. President, too, it was not worth Mr. President's time. Of course it is. When people allege that our commonwealth worth that amount of money is out there to be sold, even every responsible president, like the president rightly did, would want to investigate. And the AG himself was part of that team. And what the AGF didn't tell you is he also was part of the team that visited China to investigate that. We have all this information. And other members and a certain general, Mohammed Gololo, also was part of those who were involved in this investigation at the time. So it is totally, unconscionable that the AGF would make that statement without saying that. So he is only giving his own evidence based on what their investigation was. And that is part of what we need to invite him again about. What did you find when you went to China?
Okay.
Did you go to China? So these are questions that he needs to answer about that. But like I said, we're not out to condemn or to accuse anybody. We're trying to find the facts. And it was something that merited the House looking into. And we've been able to unearth some facts. Some things are classified and I will not be able to say them on television. Some investigations we did behind closed doors. Some of the people who are the whistleblowers, although suddenly they started, being recalcitrant and started to be sponsoring some individuals to come and start protesting because they thought we would just condemn everybody and say they stole money. No, we owe everybody a duty of care to know the facts. And the facts are before us now, not showing that that kind of thing happened, but there has been correspondence. There was an investigation that even the president commissioned to be done.
Okay, so I think it will raise questions as to how exactly it is, because you raise questions about how we sell our crude.
Yes.
It will raise questions about the processes. Who are those
Precisely.
responsible? Is it the NNPC? Are you talking about crude that was stolen from the Niger Delta? Because don't forget that only recently the president, the presidency gave a contract to ensure that we don't lose as much as we're losing. I think we're saying about 70 million or is it $700 million a month is what we're losing on a monthly basis, from the theft of crude oil in the Niger Delta. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. Honorable Mark Bila, who is the chairman House Ad Hoc Committee on the Theft of Crude Oil, is our guest tonight, and we're talking about the sale of the missing 48 million barrels of crude, which has now been disputed. Well, Honorable, the fact that this kind of matter can even rear its head, a number of questions will immediately be asked. The crude oil that's been sold from Nigeria, are we talking about crude that is legally being sold, or is it the crude oil that was stolen from the Niger Delta? What crude are we looking at here?
Now, okay, so very quickly, let me point out how the process works. Typically, LCs are raised for each crude cargo. So if legitimately this crude left the country, it is impossible for it to have, because it's already sold when it's leaving. But then you have cases, rightly so, of theft of crude, alleged transfer of crude, not proper measurement, because we have had issues with our metering. So it's possible too that those are cases. So that's the incident most likely where something like that could have occurred. So it is still Nigeria's crude at the end of the day if it was found there. So the expectation is if somebody identified that crude somehow got to China that was not recorded in our database, then the funds from it should have been remitted back to the country. So that's the only incident and the only circumstance within which that could have occurred, at least from my own knowledge too of the process. So it is impossible if it is legitimately through the process of how we sell our crude for that amount, because LCs should have been raised ordinarily. So except if, hey, we know our Nigerian issues, somehow somebody does not raise an LC and the cargo leaves this country, and then maybe in those incidents.
Under whose purview, I mean, is the LC supposed to be raised? Are we looking at an agency of government, or we're looking at the ministry? I mean,
there was an agency of
NNPC, or
it was
who is
between the NNPC and the regulator, that is then DPR and NNPC, but NNPC mostly because they were the joint venture partners, and NAPIMS was basically handling the issues on behalf of the government at the time.
So are you inviting the Minister of, or let's say the Minister of State for Petroleum, if we still have one?
The Commission Chief Executive has appeared. We're waiting for their submission before we re-invite him. The Group Chief Executive Officer of the NNPCL now, too, is supposed to come before us to give his own information. And then, yes, definitely the Minister also. But we have not bothered to focus Minister of State.
Okay.
We have not, obviously the Minister at the moment is the President. So, but Minister of State, we have not been too concerned about the Minister of State, because a lot of what has transpired isn't within their purview to handle. So when it's necessary, then we would also invite the Minister.
The hearing is still ongoing?
Yes, it is.
You're going to be rounding off the House sometime in June. I think the 5th of June is when the House is going to wrap up. Do you think that this hearing will be done before the 5th of June?
Yes, it's not exactly the 5th. Typically, it should be the 9th or the 10th of June. But because it's, I think it's a weekend, it might have to spill over to the next sitting day, which will be the 13th. But ordinarily, it's supposed to terminate on the 9th or 10th of June. But yes, we will do that. We have already received express instructions from the House to wrap up the activities of ad hoc committees and all committees. So we're working assiduously to do so. We will very quickly embark on maybe a 2 or 3 day trip to meet with some, because like from the U.S. end I was telling you about, there's a lot of information we have received about details of crude that got into the U.S. and several other countries that do not appear allegedly to be accounted for. So, and then in regards to what you said earlier, a report of a committee can recommend further investigation. So Nigerians should not be worried in the next House or conclude on it and say nothing happened. And then there will be no need to look at it because of the facts and the documents, a lot of which we have obtained. Our own job is to do a report, make those recommendations based on our findings and our conclusions, and then refer it to the relevant arm of the executive to implement and to execute. Now that is where a lot of times some of us think the compromise happens. There are many recommendations that have been sent to anti-graft agencies. They have, put it in the back burner. They have not acted on it. This particular issue I'm talking about, like certain other issues of whistleblowing, some of which I'll mention very quickly, have actually been referred to the anti-graft agencies. The House didn't need to start to look at it, but it's because of the lack of action that we, who are the representatives of the people, feel that smacks of some form of compromise.
Can you tell us about some of these issues?
First and foremost, for instance, the Attorney General will still come back to answer how 16 billion was paid each to 2 companies.
16 billion naira?
Naira. 2 companies, Biz Plus and GSCL Consulting Services, from the Paris refund. that was paid. This is a controversy which, like I'm sure you know, it was in the media as well at the time. This issue was referred to the NFIU. As we speak, we have only just received a response from the NFIU, which we will study about what transpired. This is after several until we were able to furnish them with facts that we now saw this whistleblower actually wrote to the NFIU. We got that document and we now told the NFIU, but you were told, why didn't you tell Nigerians the outcome of your investigation? But the NFIU has now responded. That is one of the cases. This has to do with the Attorney General. Another case that has to do with the Attorney General, also the case of the Sandesara brothers, Nitin Sandesara, Chetan Kumar, his wife, Diptiben Nitin's wife. This is the owner of the Sterling Group of companies. This is somebody who is doing business severally in the oil sector. Even he's involved in the Kolmani project and other projects. As we speak, he's a wanted fugitive in India for having defrauded allegedly, but the Indian authorities have put out even an extradition request. But our own Attorney General said it was politically motivated. How could you explain that? This is somebody in his country is wanted for allegedly defrauding banks of $1.something billion. He's finding safe haven in Nigeria. We hear he has a passport now. He's being given business by the Nigerian authorities. Is that what we want to encourage? No wonder our image and transparency index is not improving.
And lastly, just the news that we received today that Senator Ike Ekweremadu has now been sentenced to 10 years. The House wrote, the Senate wrote, former President Olusegun Obasanjo wrote, and it was seen that all of this has not been considered, or perhaps it has been. Are you disappointed by the judgment or the sentence that has been delivered on Senator Ekweremadu?
Yes, I'm very, very disappointed at that judgment. It is a very sad day for Nigeria and our relationship with the British government. Some of us don't think this matter should have gotten to the stage where it is at the moment. We take particular exception to the way he has been treated by the Scotland Yard, even after carrying a diplomatic passport, and that for the principal reciprocation is not what we expect. We would not treat, I don't expect us to treat a British national with a diplomatic status in this country the way he was treated. But I believe all is not lost. We as a House of Representatives have written to the British government. The Senate has done so, and we're also waiting for our own government to put more pressure. We have seen leniency being provided. We have seen plea bargains being had, and we believe that this is what should be looked at.
Yeah, but some people will say, aren't you just being elitist, that this is a country where they believe that, the law serves all. All are equal before the law. So,
yes.
I mean,
so that is why,
shouldn't he have been sentenced?
Yes, that is why I also mentioned that if someone who had a diplomatic passport can be treated that way, that's why it should be a concern to us, ordinary Nigerians as well. So it's not just about the elite, it's about us looking seriously about our relationship with the British government in this regard. Now, personally, I am aware, and it's in the public domain, that his process of getting a visa for that individual was through the right channels, through the UK Home Office. It was even clearly indicated the purpose of his going. At what point did the UK Home Office not alert the Scotland Yard or somebody else to the fact that somebody was coming to do human trafficking or organ trafficking in the UK? So that is disingenuous as far as I'm concerned for the UK government also not to blame their system. It went through a process. That individual got a visa. The hospital was interacting with the senator. They had the details of his coming for the treatment. Everything turned over on its head when that particular individual, for very selfish reasons, started making those claims. We have seen incidents, and that is where I see it was poor judgment on the part of the senator. That part I must admit. You don't just meet anybody and start to take them in such confidence to think that they would rightfully go and, do what you honestly wanted to do for the benefit of your daughter. That individual was selfish. He obviously wanted to stay abroad and went and raised those allegations from what we have gathered.
But, shouldn't we be able to trust the judiciary to look at all of these evidence and know whether indeed, there was some merit to the matter which the young man had raised?
Yes, I agree. It is their prerogative, of course. But obviously, with the benefit of hindsight is why I'm saying what I said. I don't believe that the sentence was commensurate to what transpired. I think it was too harsh. I think it was too condemning of the individual. And sometimes when these things happen, it's marks of what some of us feel is the bias, certain countries have towards Nigerians, and the tendency they just think we are, corrupt, insincere people.
Well, Honorable Magbila, we look forward to seeing how this will be resolved between the Nigerian government and the British government. But we thank you for coming on Hard Copy.
Thank you very much, Malpe.
Well, that's the program tonight. We appreciate your feedback. Please use the handles showing on your screen.
So guys, you can see that honestly, this government, they've destroyed Nigeria, and the same APC is working hard to come back to power. These are the same set of people that have set Nigeria 10 years backward. Some people even say Buhari has taken Nigeria 100 years backward. These are people that could not even provide, simple infrastructure to the Nigerian people, considering the amount of money that was borrowed. You ask all the money they got from IMF, they got from China, they got from the European groups or companies or whatever. All the money that this government borrowed, where are they? Where are they? We can't even see it working for the Nigerian people. And that is why Peter Obi said they borrow for consumption. They don't borrow to invest. We don't have good medical care. We don't have good hospitals. We don't have good schools. Look at our schools, even our private, look at our federal schools. They are all in a bad shape. And you begin to wonder, were these people just sent to destroy Nigeria? So guys, that is where we are today. And that is why I'm calling on the Nigerian people. Please stand up and let us fight for a new Nigeria. A new Nigeria is possible. As the judiciary begins their proceedings, we are hoping that they are going to defend our democracy and that we create a new path to success for Nigeria. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, turn on the notification bell. Please give this video a like so that YouTube can recommend it to others. And let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thank you.